Self-judgments of competence range greatly. Competence judgments are critical in testing the concept of fulfillment. Motivation software of this principle requires accurate manage or assessment of the subjective probabilities in an man or woman's competence judgments. Subjective chances are of kinds 1, subjective possibility of fulfillment, and 2, consensual problem stage or generalized judgments. Approximately trouble. Numerous techniques for putting off or controlling individual competence judgments had been devised. In a single technique, the subject states his possibility of fulfillment for the task. In any other method, the concern is given an assessment of his competence previous to performance of the undertaking. A few research have shown that the competence variable is relevant in measuring fulfillment motivation. This subject matter requires further research. Extrinsic incentives, which include social approval and prestige, also play a position inside the competence variable. The tendency to carry out an fulfillment-related act will growth as a feature of consensual difficulty degree. Competence is essential, measurable, and can be used to assess the connection between external definition of difficulty stage and subjective chances. Humans fluctuate broadly in terms of the degree to which they consider themselves to possess various competencies. This is, we don't forget ourselves to be enormously properly geared up to cope with some styles of skilled tasks and much less properly ready to deal with others. I seek advice from those beliefs as competence judgments. They ought to be correlated with, however now not identical to, actual competencies as measured. I will speak approximately some of the results of these variations and self-scores on attempts to test the concept of success motivation, as it's Miles presently said. Any significant software of the concept depends on an accurate manipulator. Evaluation of the subjective opportunity variable and techniques for meeting this requirement have been severe and varied. An expertise of the problems concerned in those techniques and of the opposite points I'd want to make relies upon a difference among sorts of issue level. First is the person's subjective judgment as to the likelihood that he can succeed on a given success undertaking. This is the PS or subjective opportunity of success variable within the modern theory. Judgments can also be made about the problem level of obligations. In more popular phrases, for example, how difficult the undertaking is for the average man, or what percentage of a given populace can prevail. As a result, as an instance, the farther away topics stand from a goal in a dart-throwing experiment, the smaller the share who may be expected to hit the goal. Further, occupations may be ranked with an excessive degree of interjudge reliability with appreciate to the percentage of the populace who has the requisite ability. I name those generalized judgments about difficulty level consensual problem. Generally given a set of achievement tasks, subjective opportunity price ranks will fall in at least more or less the identical order as obtains for the consensual trouble dimension. But, and this is a basic point in my argument, even though the ORD 6 ring can be the same, the places of the range of subjective chance values can fall at pretty different factors along the consensual problem dimension, relying on competence, that is, the degree to which the individual believes he possesses the skills vital for a success performance on the responsibilities of the kind involved. As an instance, if one believes himself to be superb at a unique sort of challenge, he can also have a excessive PS on obligations for which handiest a small proportion of the population can be predicted to be triumphant. These competence variations can and feature created problems and applications of the principle of success motivation. If we present subjects with tasks which vary in consensual issue level, we haven't any way of being positive as to what PlayStation values are generated. Glaringly, consequences may be distorted severely with the aid of this issue. Adding to the importance of these considerations is the reality that competence judgments and success motives can be interrelated. Several studies by Feather, a take a look at through Brody, and statistics these days gathered through Shrubland myself offer proof displaying that success motives are associated with subjective probability of fulfillment. That is, given maximum forms of statistics about trouble level, consisting of distance from the goal in a dart-throwing experiment, or the percentage of the populace who can be successful, and so forth, PS tends to be correlated definitely with measures of the motive to approach success, referred to as M's, and to be correlated negatively with measures of the motive to avoid failure, referred to as MF. For this reason, while criterion differences among purpose businesses are examined, variations acquired may also mirror PlayStation differences as opposed to being an expression of the purpose. Variations probably below research. Exactly this set of occasions has been postulated to account for a few anomalous effects in preceding studies. Smith showed, as an instance, that predictions from the theory about degree of staying power on a very last exam had been borne out simplest while intelligence used as a degree of relative competence turned into taking under consideration. There are numerous techniques for casting off or controlling troubles created through man or woman differences in competence. Actual frequency of achievement or failure may be controlled or assessed in an experimental situation, and subsequent power of dispositions may be tested. Capability problems with this approach are suggested by way of recent paintings by using Feather, who has proven that once those sequences of fulfillment and failure are in marked evaluation to preliminary expectancies, overall performance level is affected in approaches which may also difficult to understand. A take a look at of the present-day theory. Weiner's work additionally would recommend that inertial tendency effects might complicate using this technique. Any other viable approach is genuinely asking S's to state their personal opportunity of success with appreciate to tasks. We have a few evidence for the usefulness of this method, even though other results propose that introspection about the PS values of obligations creates special situations which we do now not as yet apprehend. In every other assault in this trouble I devised an experimental scenario in which the effects of cause-associated competence variations had been apparently reduced to a minimum. I attempted to convince topics that an accurate assessment of their competence with admire to duties used have been made, and that statistics presented on challenge issue represented an correct statement of their personal PlayStation for the tasks. With this method, on 2 occasions, the prediction that subjects for whom Ha exceeds me might show a fantastically extra preference for duties of intermediate problem than could subjects of the alternative purpose sample turned into sincerely confirmed. In another experimental circumstance similar to the first, besides that statistics approximately alx.lity level did not preclude to have an impact on of competence variations, the sample of results couldn't be dealt with by means of the principle until the have an effect on of reason-associated variations in competence turned into assumed. Another method to hassle of manipulative competence variations is to try to investigate inter- and intra-man or woman differences in competence with admire to the general class CF achievement duties in question. Morris used this method in a have a look at of the rated attractiveness of occupations. He advanced a reliable degree of relative competence inside diverse occupational clusters, which grasp collectively due to the fact they presumably require the equal trendy magnificence of skills, for example, mechanical, musical, scientific, and many others. Within each of the clusters he decided on jobs at kind of equal points along the consensual difficulty size. He assumed that during regions of excessive competence the jobs with mild PlayStation could have excessive consensual trouble, whilst in areas of low competence, jobs with a moderate PlayStation might fall at the smooth quid of the consensual difficulty scale. Topics for whom MF had been anticipated to decide on jobs of excessive consensual problem in excessive competence areas and of low consensual problem in low competence regions. The opposite pattern became expected of topics for whom MF miss. Both sets of predictions were confirmed, without a consideration of competence. Variations, relationships between success reason styles and level of occupational aspiration were minimum, allocating which paralleled my experimental. Have a look at of difficulty options where such controls have been not applied. In addition, work with the competence variable, shrubble, and I've been able to reveal that it has relevance even for the size of the success cause. We presently count on that the writing of fable stories from which the strength of motive is inferred is problem to the identical rules as any achievement associated tendency. Thus the latent cause, in mixture with subjective expectancies, aroused by using image cues, produces fulfillment-associated tendencies, the electricity of which decide the likelihood of appearance of scoreable and fulfillment content in the fantasies. The absence of success myth can as a consequence replicate the absence of suitable expectancies as well as the absence of the purpose, shrubble, and that I selected pictures which have been clean with recognized to the sort of abilities required for suitable overall performance on the sports portrayed. Using Morris' measure of competence, we tested variations in amount and sort of success imagery related to pictures portraying activities differing within the volume to which the man or woman felt he possessed the needful competence. We reasoned that very high competence with recognized to activities represented in a photograph might be associated with fantasies of particular accomplishments at very high stages of consensual problem, along with inventions or discoveries, or alternatively with fantasies of destiny excessive level career activities. It have to be those forms of sports for which fulfillment-related inclinations would be maximal in excessive competence regions due to the fact the slide thread is represented by using these sports when the man or woman is high in competence. Those sorts of fantasies are part of the hooked-up and fulfillment scoring machine. For pics of low-competence sports, we expected that the immediately and ordinary needs for simple properly performance could approach the fairly hard variety, and that we'd locate in these fantasies subject matters presently scored for want fulfillment absolutely due to the fact they meet the criterion of evidence of problem over opposition with requirements of excellence. Each expectancies were showed. Additionally, we tentatively anticipated that low competence snapshots may display much less general scoreable and success, due to the fact there might be no hobby, regardless of how clean, for which the man or woman would possibly have a PlayStation appreciably above zero. This expectation turned into truly confirmed. For S above the median on intelligence, they wrote extra and fulfillment fantasies in reaction to excessive as contrasted to low competence pictures. For low IQ topics, excessive school elderly men, the consequences had been simply as clean however reversed. We do not have any prepared reason for this reversal, but we sense it may constitute a clue as to the circumstances underneath which fulfillment fantasies may additionally constitute substitutive or compensatory myth, and while they will represent an illustration of a persistent latent tendency to our seeking for actively certain classes of incentives. In any event, this piece of labor suggests that manage of the competence variable in size of the motive demands in addition investigation. It is able to be in critical supply of mistakes in present measurement of the purpose. I ought to factor out that the adjustments of the principle to be put forth by means of Rayner in the subsequent presentation can deal pretty elegantly with maximum of the outcomes I've just mentioned, in addition to some of the others I can describe. Some other crucial factor at the results of competence, consistent with the theory, as presently said, the power of the fulfillment-related dispositions aroused via duties of the same PS would be equal, and the reality that they have been drawn from areas differing in competence would be beside the point with admire to the electricity of these particular tendencies. But, humans have other motives to be successful, of path, and its miles identified that the entire strength of the tendency to carry out a challenge requiring talent consists of sub-dispositions associated with other incentives contingent on successful overall performance. An essential fact about many of those extrinsic incentives such as social approval, prestige, money, etc. is that the extra hard the challenge is seemed to be by others, the more the high quality of incentives acquired due to fulfillment. In excessive competence regions, the individual has a pretty high subjective opportunity of achievement on duties of high consensual problem, tasks which others see as very tough, and which therefore offer high extrinsic incentive value. Commonly speak, then, extrinsic dispositions ought to be appreciably stronger in these areas. Due to the fact even though responsibilities of equal playstation may also arouse equal fulfillment-associated dispositions, the entire tendency should be greater for the mission from a place of excessive competence than of low. Morris located in the formerly cited study that almost all of his excessive college-aged students stated a vocational preference which fell in an area of excessive competence. Subjects for whom MF selected from many of the jobs of very excessive consensual difficulty inside regions of high competence. This was predictable from the belief that those are the roles most closely approaching the PlayStation .50 point for excessive competence regions. My argument is that the strong extrinsic dispositions aroused by using these unique jobs brought on them to be favored to different moderately difficult jobs, in PS terms, in areas of low or slight competence. Topics for whom MFMs also chose in areas of high competence, however they averted the top stage jobs which we count on have a PS drawing close .50. By means of choosing jobs of slight consensual difficulty in excessive competence regions, they were in truth selecting jobs of relatively excessive subjective opportunity of success. For this reason, they were keeping off the moderately tough stage of occupational aspiration, as anticipated from the theory, even as selecting jobs with highly excessive extrinsic payoffs for which their chance of attainment turned into excessive. The way in which the outcomes of success and failure may be mediated by means of the competence variable need to also be taken into consideration. Note that achievement and failure not simplest change PlayStation for tasks to hand, however in addition they exchange competence, that is, they cause the 0 to at least 1.0 subjective opportunity variety to shift up or down on the consensual issue scale. Therefore success or failure could have an effect now not simplest on the strength of fulfillment-related dispositions to carry out any act of a given consensual issue degree, but also they have an effect on the electricity of total tendency to carry out acts which fall particularly areas of competence through modifications inside the energy of extrinsic dispositions. Fulfillment or failure at a few tasks can also in reality have notable self-diagnostic implications. The facts tells the man or woman the extent to which he can realistically aspire to obtain the quite valued incentives which success at high consensual problem levels affords. Much of what I've been saying depends on the idea that there are tremendously universally perceived, cohesive clusters of abilities and that people do recognize various duties as falling inside such clusters. To the extent that this is not actual an assessment of competence within a place is vain. However, the reasoning I've supplied could assert that the idea is challenged to check success or failure on a mission of a specific consensual issue degree would have an effect on the subjective opportunity of other responsibilities to the quantity to which the second task becomes seen as requiring the identical skills. Accordingly, the electricity of inclinations to perform the second undertaking would be affected in predictable approaches if it smiles. The case that the two obligations do certainly fall in the identical location of competence. Sincerely, you'll be able to opposite the good judgment and begin to find out about the degree to which duties are perceived as requiring the equal abilities via inspecting the degree to which achievement or failure on a given venture affects the electricity of tendencies aroused by responsibilities which possibly fall in the same place of competence. In summary then, competence is an critical and measurable mediator of the relationship between the outside cues defining problem stage and the subjective chance values derived. Consequently, it is an important determinant of versions and power of success-related dispositions aroused by means of any objectively describable outside state of affairs. We've seen a number of possible approaches in which to have an effect on if the variable can be eliminated or assessed, along with its operation in the dimension of the success motive itself. A number of research genuinely suggests that powerful assessments of the concept of success motivation are depending on such steps. Sooner or later I've suggested that insofar because the overall energy of tendency to perform and fulfillment-related act consists of dispositions geared toward incentives extrinsic to success, competence will have crucial effects at the energy of the whole tendency to carry out the act to the extent that these extrinsic incentives boom as a function of the consensual problem degree.